We have a candidate for State Representative, District 5, Vance Coley. Welcome to the show, Vance. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on this afternoon.
We're glad to have you. Now, tell us a little bit about yourself. Most people may not know you, but just give us a brief history of who you are and let people know that you're from the area.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love having an opportunity to tell my story because I love this area so much. I was born and raised in Marianna. This is home. It's always been home. I moved away for a little while to go to school and actually worked on political campaigns for some of my early 20s. But as soon as I had a chance, I moved back home to Marianna to begin working to kind of better this community and working with some of our wonderful partners in the community that have really renewed a sense of involvement here. So as I said, I'm from here. I was born and raised here. I went to school at Marianna High School. So this is home. The Florida Panhandle has always been home. And we have seen that change over the years. It looks a lot different now than it did when most of us were born. And I'm sure it will look much different in the coming years. So what I do for a living, I work for David Melvin. And what my role is I help local governments fund projects that they need, but don't necessarily have the resources for. So as you can imagine, our primary focus right now is Hurricane Michael recovery. And as I got in that role, I really realized just how many needs still existed in this part of the state. For many people outside of Jackson County and our area, Hurricane Michael's over. But we know here at home that Hurricane Michael is very much still going on. We still have lots of recovery that needs to take place. And I began to look around and look to see who might carry our representation to Tallahassee and tell that story in the coming years, as we will have an open seat. And I didn't see anybody that I thought could carry that message as well as I could. So I threw my hat in the ring, filed paperwork to run for state representative, and that's where I am now. And what that role looks like and what that kind of campaign looks like right now is listening. We've got a lot of talkers in politics. We don't have many listeners. And that's a problem because I know what my life is like, but I don't always know what your life is like or what your needs are. And so that's what I'm doing right now is kind of going around and listening, finding out what people's needs are, and finding out how I can best carry their voice to Tallahassee and make sure that our rural communities, because District 5 is a rural district. We do have Walton County, which has coastal areas. We now include Calhoun County. But as you can see, Jackson County, Washington County, Holmes County, Calhoun County, these are very rural counties that aren't always given attention in Tallahassee. And so that's my priority and why I'm running is to make sure that there's somebody over there being a squeaky wheel. There's somebody willing to be a little bit annoying on behalf of their constituents and make sure that when we see the budget come out every year, it's not just Miami, it's not just Tampa, it's not just Jacksonville, but Marianna, Bascom, Jacob City. I saw Jacob City in the budget last year, and that was exciting because we don't always see that.
Exactly.
And so that's really what I'm doing is trying to carry forward the momentum of recovery, but doing so in a way that we're not only recovering here in the Panhandle, but we're building back just a little bit better to make sure that we can take advantage of this growth, this record growth that's coming to our area. Because as we know it, Florida's full below us, Florida's full to the left of us, and Florida's full to the right of us. Growth is coming, whether we're ready or not. But I want to make sure that we are growing in a strategic way so that our citizens are, number one, taken care of with the infrastructure they need, and we can encourage that growth in a healthy way. So that's kind of a bird's eye view of me and my campaign, but I'll tell you what I love the most about this is being able to answer questions. So I would love to answer any questions you have or and to your listeners and to your watchers. Vance Coley for Florida.com. That is my website. That's got all of my information, and that's also got my contact information. Any questions that we don't answer today, please feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to chat.
Well, I'm glad you shared that information, Vance. So, I'm just going to start with this. You mentioning that Calhoun has been added to the, to your, to particular district. So I was warning about that, and most people may not know, but the redistricting takes place every 10 years, just like the county, that the state does it as well. And now Calhoun is in it along with us. So what does that mean to you? Because now the actual area has been expanded. It was just Washington, Holmes, Jackson, and part of Bay. So what does that mean for you?
Yeah. So selfishly, I'm very pleased. My mother's family is from Calhoun County, so I've got roots there. My grandmother lives in Calhoun County, and I've kind of grown up around Bluntstown. So I have lots of roots. And as I mentioned earlier, Calhoun County's problems and issues look an awful lot like Jackson County's problems and issues, and Washington County, and these rural counties' issues. So I do feel like Calhoun County fits into this district well. Whether or not it's on purpose, if you look at the map of District 5, it looks a lot like the Hurricane Michael map. And so that's good and bad. It's good because the issues are kind of consistent, and it's easier to get an idea of what we need to be talking about. But they only get one voice in Tallahassee. And so it's very important that voice we send to Tallahassee is a capable voice and a voice with experience, and that is my voice. And so I'm very proud to have Calhoun County. As I said, it's where my family's from, and I feel like I will do a good job of carrying their voice to Tallahassee.
So let's just make sure the viewers understand, who your parents are. You want to just share that? Who's your mom and?
Yeah. So I tell people, for me, politics is a little bit like the family business. I don't know whether or not that's a good or a bad thing. It probably depends on who you ask. But I did grow up in the process. My father, David Coley, was a political staffer for years and then ultimately ran for state representative and won in 2004. Sadly, he was diagnosed with cancer and died shortly after. But my mother, Marty Coley, stepped up and took the mantle and ran in a special election and won that seat and held that seat for another 8 years. She was an English teacher by trade. By the time she left, she was probably one of the most effective leaders Northwest Florida has seen in a long time. I say that to say that I've got some big shoes to fill, but it's shoes I've grown up watching. It's things I've grown up being around, and I have the best advisors I can have. And so that's important. My family background is important, but I'll tell you this, I am running because I do believe I'm the best candidate. And while I will mention, my family, and my family is very important to me, I do believe that my resume stands by itself, and I think that's a good thing because we need to make sure we have good experience in Tallahassee.
So Vance, let's talk about this. So there's a proposed bill currently that could possibly strip the school board members of their salaries. What are your thoughts about that?
I understand why that bill's in play. Obviously, school boards have been in the news a little bit over the last year. It depends on who you ask. You'll hear all kinds of things. This is the legislature's attempt to, I guess, take some power away from school boards. I understand the sentiment. I don't like that idea because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that anybody can run for and hold elected office. And that means not necessarily limiting it to people that are financially sound or that can afford to not work full time because they have an elected position. I think taking away any sort of pay, any sort of compensation for school board members opens the door to just that. You're only going to have the independently wealthy and people like that. We don't want that. We do want accountability for our school boards, and we do want to make sure that parents are not being cut out of the process. Fortunately, here in Northwest Florida, we do a pretty good job of involving parents in the process, and our school boards are very responsive. That's not always the case in other parts of the state, but if we're going to attack problems, let's make sure we're attacking problems and not symptoms. And I think going after just a paycheck is going after a symptom, not a problem.
Right. So for this area, I'm glad you brought that up as well, as far as problematic, people putting band-aids on things. The biggest thing in this area, because it's rural, jobs, lack of housing, affordable housing. How do you approach those situations or those problems?
It's always very interesting when we sit down with businesses and other people that we're trying to recruit to our area. I think we always expect that the reason they wouldn't come is because of roads or lack of infrastructure. But the number one response we get is a lack of workforce. They said, we would love to come, but you don't have the workforce we need, whether it's because of education, whether it's because there's nowhere for them to live, which we know is a huge problem. So you're absolutely right. That is a problem that has been band-aided over the years and is coming to a head. We've seen the rents kind of increase around the state, but it's coming here. And after Hurricane Michael, we've lost most affordable housing. So we need to attack that. Number one, we make sure the Sadowski Fund is used for its original purpose. For those that are listening, there's a trust fund in the state of Florida that anytime you buy a house or do a real estate transaction, your doc stamp money goes to that trust fund. That trust fund is supposed to be used for affordable housing initiatives throughout the state. The Florida Housing Finance Corporation kind of administers that. The fun thing about trust funds is you don't have to use them for what they're intended for. And very often, the legislature does not use it for affordable housing. It remains called that. That's what the money goes there for, but it gets used for other things. I would like to see a constitutional amendment limiting that trust fund to only affordable housing initiatives. I think that's the first way we combat it. The second way we combat it, there's a great bill in the House right now that is, as a tenant, you have the option now to pay security deposits and first and last month's rent in installments. Because that's the biggest issue with affordable housing. You might make $35,000 a year, but you owe $6,000 right off the bat to be able to move in. That doesn't add up. That doesn't make sense. And so that's a big issue. As far as up here, supply is the biggest issue. We need to build houses. We don't have many affordable houses. We have seen local governments partner with the St. Joe Company, with Royal American in Bay County, and there has been some progress being made. Right now, there's $1 billion sitting in Tallahassee for affordable housing in Hurricane Michael affected areas. Unfortunately, that money is reserved for repairs. Now, you and I know, and your listeners know, you can't repair something that doesn't exist anymore. And for most of our affordable housing, it's been knocked over. It doesn't exist anymore. So that's what I tell people: write your congressman. I've reached out to everybody from Congressman Lawson to Congressman Dunn and let them know we need to change how that money, because it is federal money, how that money can be spent. But that's a first step. We need long-term strategizing, and that everything has to be on the table, because at the end of the day, we have to have places for these people to live.
That's right, because honestly, it's like a revolving door, or I should say revolving cycle. Affordable housing, workforce. You can't have people here to work if they don't have a place to stay. So it's a constant, cycle. It's like, how do you break out of the cycle?
That's a very good question. And if you know the answer, please share it with me. And unfortunately, I think a lot of us, there is no silver bullet, but it takes number one, prioritizing it. When you make affordable housing your top priority, you're going to see some improvements made. That conversation has begun. I'm excited to see that. Hopefully in 5 years, when you and I are talking again, we've built some houses.
That's good. Being that you have an inside track, you're working with engineering company, so I guess you can kind of see, the layout that's being proposed. Would you kind of share some of that with us?
Yeah, so obviously the county's top priority right now is the Endeavor project, which is the restoration of the old Dozier property. We all know that unfortunately didn't always have the best legacy, but fortunately partners from around our communities have partnered together and said, we are going forward, make that property something we can all be proud of. And that's what's happened. The county has pledged money, Mariana has pledged money, and the state's been involved. I know the NAACP and some other groups have been working right along. It's been a beautiful project to bring everyone together. And with that area comes a lot of affordable housing opportunities. And so I've seen that prioritized. The conversations have begun. Funding is being, kind of obtained right now. And very soon, I think you should see some big progress being made out kind of the south side of our community.
So Vance, let's talk about the rise in electrical bills. Can you talk about that? Most people are complaining. They're trying to figure out what's the solution. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it doesn't help that at the same time power bills are rising. We're talking about legislation in Tallahassee to kind of reduce and remove homeowners' rights involving solar energy. I think whether or not those two things are connected, I think it sends the wrong message. Because energy costs are more expensive and they're going up quickly. Some of that is inflation, based on inflation. Some of that is based on aging infrastructure, and some of that is flat out based on profit. So you have several things coming together. The first thing we need to do in the state of Florida before we do anything else is ensure that our utilities companies are included in emergency language. One big issue we've had in Northwest Florida is most of this recovery money and this relief money is obviously limited to public projects. Local governments can take it. Very, very seldomly can this money be spent on private property. Most of our utilities in Northwest Florida are in fact privately owned. So they have had to pay for a lot of the recovery out of their own pockets. And as we're seeing now, our customers are seeing some of that. But that's only part of it. And we know the prices were rising before that. We've got to invest in infrastructure. Number one, we have to make sure that our power companies aren't constantly having to replace things and pass those costs along to our customers. And we've seen that. We've seen that they're doing a good job. I think competition is also important. You know, utilities are inherently a monopoly. Obviously, we can't have 10 different utility companies in the same area, but I do think it's time we take a look and see just how restrictive we're being, because we all know that the bigger the supply, the price will go down. So, you know, as I said, that's a huge problem. The immediate effects we're feeling right now in Northwest Florida, I think, are Hurricane Michael related, but that won't always be an excuse, I guess, so to speak. Eventually, some of these problems we're going to see beyond Hurricane Michael, and I'm disappointed to see some of the things they're doing in Tallahassee around the utilities, but I suspect the pendulum is going to swing soon.
Okay, let me ask you this: give me your top 2 priorities if you were to win the election. What would it be?
Okay. These are always my favorite questions because most people expect, I think, a bill. You know, I'm going to make this a law or I'm going to do this. I tell people for the first at least 2 years, I'm going to be an appropriations heavy representative. That means you're going to see my name a lot more in the budget than you are going to see in these policy bills. And that's because that's our needs in this community. There aren't a whole lot of laws that we need to change here. There are some, of course, but the needs right now are very resource-based. And so I will be, like, as I said, you'll probably see me file a slurry of budget requests as I get up there. But on the actual policy side, I'll tell you my other top priority that I'm very excited about. The state of Florida has invested record amounts of money into workforce education over the last 10 years, which I believe is fantastic. I think we are finally starting to understand that you can be just as successful with or without a college degree, and we do our children a disservice by telling them from kindergarten on that they have to go spend $100,000 at a college to be successful. It works for some people, it doesn't for others. With that investment, that money has gone to STEM programs at places like Chipola and Gulf Coast and Northwest Florida State College, and it's been great. We've seen that. Chipola has a great welding program, all these things. Unfortunately, in the state of Florida, in order to be an instructor at a college, you still have to have a master's degree. Well, I can tell you that not many welders have master's degrees and not many roofers and all these kind of STEM type projects. So one of the first bills I sponsor will be to bring that language in effect with our stated priorities of investment. And that means for certain programs, for certain trade-based programs, we will substitute experience for education and allow some of these master welders and these titans in their industry to be able to come teach our next generation of tradesmen and tradeswomen. I think that will instantly improve the workforce situation we have in Northwest Florida, and I think it'll instantly improve how the state of Florida is looked at generally as people begin locating and investing.
That is true. That's a good point, especially here in Jackson County. Now, I know you can't, look too far in the future, but here in Jackson County, we do have people that are, leaving the area. And, it's projected to continue in the next 5 years. Unfortunately, our kids are graduating, they go off to college, and a lot of times they don't come back. So we do need something, immediately here to keep our kids, in the area.
Absolutely. It's a bit of a chicken or egg conversation, actually, because the question is, are things not here because the people aren't here, or are people not here because the things aren't here? And which has to happen first?
There's that cycle.
It's a good question. It is an unbreakable cycle. And I'll tell you, I made comments like that when I first graduated high school. I'm moving to Tallahassee and I won't come back. And you see where I'm sitting right now.
Yeah.
So number one, I would tell people, fortunately, most people realize that the grass isn't always as green as they think it is on the other side. But you're right. Most people, the first thing they do when they graduate is try to leave, whether it's a town over or a state over.
Right.
We have got to have some resources here to attract young people, to attract younger professionals, because we know the younger professionals are who are driving that investment. And I'm not seeing a lot of it. I'll tell you one of my priorities, and this is one of those pie in the sky ideas, but it's something I will work on until it either happens or I'm not here anymore. I would like to see Highway 90 slow down through our downtowns. I think a big issue that we don't have a kind of a young professional crowd, or we don't have people just locating in our cities, is because we have no downtown.
No vibrant downtown. That's true. Yeah.
Correct. And part of that is because you have semis blowing by you at 40 miles an hour as you're trying to walk from store to store. I don't know if you've ever heard of DeLand, Florida, but I'd encourage all of your watchers to look up DeLand. It's a little town in Volusia County, very similar to Marianna, but they actually rerouted their truck traffic around downtown, and they are thriving.
Wow.
So it can be done, and it's something I want to see done. And I think it would be a step towards that unbreakable cycle you're talking about. And part of that's cultural as well. We need to start telling our kids it is a success story if you grow up in Marianna and stay in Marianna. It is a success story if you grow up in Chipley and stay in Chipley. It does not mean that you were unsuccessful or that your friends who moved away were more successful. I think as we begin to change kind of the culture of that conversation, along with bringing in some of these resources, I think you'll really start to see some progress.
Yeah, recreating the narrative, because you're right. Most people think you're not successful if you're still here and your friends, are not, and they go off to a different city. But one thing kids are lacking here as well is entertainment. When you're looking at, the 12 to 18-year-olds, there's no skating ring. There's no really rec center here that you can have. And a lot of times people were thinking that could have been something developed on the Endeavor project. Like if you have tournaments all around, me as a parent, I take my kid off, to a different city to play in tournaments.
Right.
We can host tournaments here, whether it's wrestling, whether it's volleyball, whether it's a basketball tournament right here in the city if we had a facility.
And I think that's what's so exciting about that Endeavor property and what you're touching on as well, because that's exactly what the idea is and the goal is it's a property that we can come together and recreate in our own image and be proud of, but it's something that will also attract you to stay and come, whether that's, events at the convention center one day out there, or tournaments at the Mirror, but, lodging at Endeavor, there's all sorts of possibilities, and you're absolutely right. And that's the idea that's being progressed forward is hopefully to kind of be a beacon on a hill. You get off the interstate and you walk by the White House and you see the history of the property, but then you also see the future of the property, and you can see how these out of bad things, good things can come, and be a resource for these young kids and these parents that want to keep their kids here in Marianna. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because you're absolutely right. That's an opportunity we have.
Yeah, I just think, we spend so much money traveling. It was like, why can't we host, a volleyball tournament or wrestling tournament or sometime tournament here in the city, right there on the Endeavor project. So I hope that's something that, you guys look at, or whoever the powers may be, take a second look at that and not just put everything at the Mirror, but have some indoor activities right there on the campus.
Absolutely. There's a beautiful basketball court out there.
Yeah. So is there anything else you want to let our viewers know about you before we end the interview?
I struck on it when I introduced myself, but I want to harp on it again because it is so very important. We have a lot of talkers in our world right now, lots of people that talk and like to hear themselves talk. We don't have very many listeners, and I don't think it's a surprise that you see that our political process is more dysfunctional than ever. We all know that when you have a room full of talkers and no listeners, communications are going to break down. I pride myself on my ability to listen. That doesn't mean I'll always agree with you. That doesn't always mean I'll line up with you. But you will never have to ask where I stand, and you will never have to ask to be able to share your opinion with me. So please, as you go forward and as the election comes up, keep that in mind. As I said, my contact information is on my website, vancecoleyforflorida.com, and I'm always happy to answer any questions or hear what you want me to know if I'm asking to be your voice in Tallahassee. So thank you. And
just tell us again, how can they reach you, Vance?
So it's vancecoleyforflorida.com.
Okay.
So VanceColey for Florida.com.
Okay. All right. Perfect. And I'm sure we will be seeing you around the county. People can get to know you. Do you have any events coming up where people can get to know you?
Yes, absolutely. And please go like and follow me on Facebook, Vance Coley for Florida State Representative, and that will keep you an idea of everywhere I am. And it'll also give you another way that you can get in touch with me.
Okay, perfect. Okay, well, thank you for joining the show. We really enjoyed talking to you, and I'm sure we'll have you back the closer it gets to the election time, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I have greatly enjoyed it.
Thank you. Vance Coley, everybody, running for State Representative for District 5.